We got more fixing to do. There's a lot of gear, a lot of broken gear, a lot of people who break gear, and not much gear for sale. So you got to keep all the old stuff running right now. It's almost like being in Cuba where they got to keep all these old cars running. But this time it's not just because I'm in Hawaii. It's because the whole world is short on gear right now. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to be watching TierZoo. And if you haven't seen TierZoo before, it's a channel where he treats the animal world like they're characters you play in a game. And so you'll hear all the regular gamer lingo. So every time an extinction level event happens, it's a balance patch. And if animals are too overpowered, they get nerfed. So it's pretty fun. And then if you know me, I am I've always been a herpetologist. Let's see if this snake stick actually shows up. So this is no joke of a snake stick. You see me using this in the studio all the time. We're doing various things, picking up guitars or whatever out of really high places. But this snake stick has had more venom on it than you would need to kill like an entire army worth of people. It's no joke. This used to be my flipping stick in Arizona. And so on TierZoo, I was hoping to see some reptile stuff. So while I'm getting the tech bench ready, I'm gonna just fire up the lizard tier list here and see what we got. I'm fixing my stream deck, so I'm not super sure how well all this is going. Let me see if the audio is actually working. Yep, looks like it's good. And right off the bat, I see a chameleon. That makes me very happy. So let's see what we can see. A chameleon and a parakeet. So you see, it's just like a video game. They tell you what level it is, how much power they got left, or whatever. All the video game stuff. I really think this channel is genius. I love it. So I'm grabbing another JBL Eon, but this time it's I think it's the newer ones. The black ones are the G2s. I'm not sure what these. Let me see what these gray ones are. We'll find out. Let me start this up.
This video was made in partnership with CuriosityStream. Reptiles are a diverse faction full of many strategies, and generally speaking, they tend to be fairly straightforward. Turtles are tank builds that spec into high defensive stats at the cost of mobility. Crocodiles are damage dealers that focus on grappling to secure kills. Snakes optimize for stealth and rely on status effects to bring down their targets. But where do lizards fit into the meta? They aren't really known for extreme speed, but as far as cold-blooded builds go, they're quicker than most. And while not as tanky as turtles, and not as stealthy as snakes, they can hold their own in each of these departments as well. Some of the larger lizards can even give crocodilians a run for their money in the power category too.
Alright, it says tweeter blown, so that's been most of what we've been doing lately, right? It says this is a JBL Eon 15 R1. So I don't know if these gray ones are newer or older than the old black ones. Let's see. Is there a JBL? Here's the G2. Those are the black ones. Yeah, I don't know, really know. I don't know how I would find it. I guess I could search all this junk, but who knows? Hopefully it's the same. Yeah. Hopefully it's the same tweeter. We'll see.
While many of them could best be described as jack-of-all-trades generalists, there are also plenty of lizards with extremely unique abilities. So to better understand the many different game plans employed by the lizard player base, today we're going through the lizard tier list. Before we get into the tier list though, first I'd like to start with some background on the history of the lizard faction. So back during the Carboniferous expansion, the meta revolved around the conflict between the two most powerful factions, the amphibians and the arthropods. However, during this time, a small subsection of the amphibian player base unlocked two new special abilities, the eggshell, which allowed them to respawn on dry land rather than in the water, and scales, which gave them massively increased dehydration resistance. This eliminated their reliance on water and allowed them to explore tons of new strategies, eventually diversifying into all of the reptile builds in today's meta, as well as a few that were so overpowered that they ended up getting nerfed. The most powerful lizard build of all time was the Mosasaurus, a build that arose from a player base of beach-dwelling monitor lizards that spec'd into aquatic mobility options in order to avoid being griefed by dinosaurs. But what are the most powerful lizards of today's meta? We're actually going to begin in D tier, as I don't think there are any truly awful lizard builds. The adaptations they've made to eliminate the weaknesses of their amphibian ancestors is enough to escape bottom tier in my opinion. So how do lizards stack up? Let's get into the tier list. In D tier, we have the skink, a smaller lizard build with very little in the way of unique special abilities. Their stats are also quite low, and their game plan generally just consists of chasing down players in the lower.
So if you live in the Pacific, I don't know, skinks are pretty amazing. They seem to have been able to raft or hitch a ride on boats to colonize like so many places where you wouldn't think there would be lizards at all, like places really far away from other places. I'm not sure in Hawaii. We have several species of skinks, but I don't know if they all got here on boats or if they all got here without human intervention or if there's a mix of it. But they are amazing rafters, just like geckos. But I don't think they have the some of the disadvantages geckos have, where they can dry out so easy. Then again, nothing sticks to things like a gecko, so maybe maybe the gecko's got an advantage on holding on. And then there's really big ones like the blue-tongued skink. Make really popular pets. I got one over at Tommy Gibbons' place. Those guys are pretty robust. A lot of them don't really have legs. They're very snake-like. So I like skinks, but I guess maybe they're the bottom tier lizard.
Lower weight classes, and struggles pretty hard when forced to defend itself. In particular, this build has a lot of trouble dealing with birds. Despite the fact that it often hunts in grassy fields, it lacks the stealth stats required to avoid detection from above. In fact, many skinks are known for being brightly colored or having one specifically brightly colored body part. Skinks try to avoid being griefed by digging burrows for themselves, and while burrows are a great hiding place, the burrowing playstyle tends to work best when you've got the ability to launch a powerful attack in a single direction, since the bottleneck of a burrow makes it near impossible for a predator to approach without getting hit. Skinks can't really mount any sort of attack, so if their burrow gets discovered, it's most likely game over. The one defensive ability they do have is one commonly found in the lizard player base, autotomy. Autotomy allows the user to drop their tail in order to get one free escape from a combo or grab. Now, to be fair, being able to break out of your opponent's death combos is an extremely useful trait that can save you from certain...
Well, this is cool, but a lot of lizards store their spare food in their tails, so if they drop their tail, it's kind of a bummer, but I guess it's better than getting eaten, right?
Defeat. But with that said, autotomy is extremely costly to use, isn't guaranteed to work, and leaves you with reduced max HP for the rest of the game, even if your character has regenerative abilities. For the larger lizard builds, losing your tail also removes one of your best offensive options.
As pretty as it was.
But for the skink, this isn't as big a problem. With all that being said, skinks are one of the more lackluster lizard builds, so let's keep going and get to the more interesting ones.
Oh yeah.
Also in D tier we have the Basilisk Lizard, which is most notable for its use of the sprint ability, not just to move
awesome.
fast
They run on
land,
water,
but also
really
to cross bodies of water.
Oh yeah, there you go.
At first, this ability seems quite impressive, and it certainly is a flashy move, but upon further examination, I don't think it's really all that useful in the long run. Being on the surface of the water is quite possibly the most vulnerable position in the game, leaving you open to attacks from above and below. But ultimately, I think it's more important to just point out that the whole reason the Reptile faction split off from the Amphibian player base in the first place was to remove their reliance on water. So choosing an ability with a pretty situational use that also requires that the user be on the water's edge to use it is kind of a step backwards in the grand scheme of things. The Basilisk doesn't even have bad stats. It couldn't use the water dash move without above average mobility. But still, I think its choice of moveset is pretty self-limiting, and they'd be better off speccing into other signature moves. In C tier, we have two lizard builds who invested heavily into the climbing ability. The Gecko build operates in a similar manner to the Tree Frog, with cling pads enabling it to climb any surface with ease. As far as mobility perks though, this is probably one of the best in the game. It works great as an escape option, but is also fantastic for utility and even for offense, allowing the user to approach targets that are normally harder to reach. Being able to hang on tight is also super important for arboreal combat, as fall damage is a major threat. With such a strong clinging ability, geckos can often be the ones tossing other players into the void below. Geckos do have a fair number of weaknesses though. They opt to use their tails to store energy, which can be a useful ability, but unfortunately in doing so, they take away the option to use their tails to attack. Geckos also do not have scales, instead opting for skin that gives disease resistance bonuses, so their armor...
Yeah, I always trip out. If you look at a gecko like this, now this is very similar to a leopard gecko, or what we have in Arizona, the Tucson banded gecko. And these are creatures that live very far apart from each other in the world, and yet somehow they're so similar. These kind of geckos can't climb for crap. I mean, they look like geckos because they're squishy and you don't see scales. And they have, you know, they lick their eyeballs. But they're so different than other geckos. I really always wonder, you know, like what? They seem more like, I know it sounds weird, but they seem to me more like monitor lizards. I never really got a good read on why these kind of geckos, the more terrestrial type of geckos rather than arboreal or whatever, are like they are. And you know, I don't know if you ever see my pictures of my Tucson banded geckos, but I had a whole colony of them. I love those guys. Really interesting creatures. Okay, I think we got this thing popped apart.
Armor class is lower than that of most lizards, and actually more akin to amphibians. Because of this, they're quite vulnerable to piercing damage, such as bird talons and snake fangs. And with relatively low damage output, their only real hope against such attacks is stealth, which some do definitely excel at. All in all, solid mid-tier. The Anole is a small, agile lizard build with a surprising number of special abilities, most notable of which are their adhesive toe pads and their color-changing skin.
If you grew up in Hawaii, this was the lizard you saw the most. We had the green Anole when I was a little kid. The green Anole was just a lizard you saw everywhere. They could change colors. They were super tame and friendly. They're really neat lizards. And around 5th or 6th grade, I started seeing these other lizards that I couldn't catch, but they were mostly in Lanikai and they were close to the ground. And I was telling the resident herpetologist at the Honolulu Zoo about it, and everybody thought I was nuts. And now I come back decades later, you almost never see green Anoles. I've seen maybe 10 since I've been back here. And that other lizard that I had been seeing since 5th grade is the brown Anole, which has totally taken this place over. It's nowhere near as friendly. It's not as pretty. It doesn't change colors as much, but it's still an amazing active lizard. It's just, I miss the green Anoles, but either way, Anoles are cool. And they're very robust.
Most builds that run the cling pad ability tend to be more bulky and cumbersome. Anoles emphatically break this mold, being both excellent climbers and having a climbing speed that rivals that of the squirrel. Because of this, they're great at escaping attacks by jumping between trees and scrambling up branches. But where things really get interesting is with the color change perk. Now, the ability to change colors is one of the most downright broken stealth perks in the game, and one of the main reasons I consider cephalopods top tier. Anoles have probably the most basic version of the color change perk, allowing them to shift between green and brown at will. While nowhere near as versatile as some other color changing builds, green and brown are pretty much all you'd need the vast majority of the time. This change is very gradual though, so it's unlikely to allow you to escape mid-combat. Which is unfortunate because, similar to the gecko, the Anole suffers from a lack of combat options when caught out in the open. Last in C tier we have the Gila monster.
C tier.
The Gila monster is one of the tank.
Alright, so this is an Arizona lizard. One of the, back in the day we thought it was one of the only venomous lizards in the world. We know better than that now. But once upon a time, we thought the Gila monster and the Mexican beaded lizard were the two venomous lizards. Now, I had never seen a Gila monster in the wild until the first Friday after I got my Jeep. I got a Jeep Wrangler, and that Friday, very close to my house, just went out into the desert, and I got to see a Gila monster. That was so cool. Now, these things are intimidating as hell. They hiss. They can hiss for minutes at a time. I don't know how they do it. Maybe some kind of circular breathing. It sounds like the air getting let out of a very, very large tire. And these are big lizards. Their clamping force is pretty insane. And, you know, their venom is no joke. It's not something you want to deal with. So, all in all, a very amazing animal. All right, so I want to make sure I don't rip these wires. Might be pulling ribbons again. Just plugging in some so I'm gonna go back to my regular mix. I'm gonna have to, what am I gonna take out? I have to turn off my send reaper. Okay, so I just want to test this this tweeter as it is right now. I need to get the next audio cable real quick. Or sorry, power cable, IEC cable. Let's see what's going on with this tweeter. Okay, turning it on. Oh, I better turn the volume down. Go. Start to turn on. Yeah, I don't think I hear the tweeter. Oh, look, see that? Tightening this on? Seems like the tweeter's on now. Oh, cockroach. Man, this is how there's cockroach eggs and everything. Oh, you heard that? It turned on and off. The tweeter works, it's just the contacts are bad or something. I gotta resolder this. So we've seen how easy it is to damage this circuit trace right here. So I'm going to pull that and have a look. Lupus section. See, I wonder if this cockroach egg nest got under here and it can't ground now. I don't know, it's just really stuck to here. I don't want to pull on it because these things are really fragile, but there we go. Okay, so you see this one's actually got wires. So I don't see what's broken. I got a soldering iron that I can see what? I think this trace might be coming up. Let me hit it with the soldering iron. Let that cool for a second. See that? Probably coming loose. I'm gonna hit this side just in case. Gotta order some more solder, it looks like. Almost want to Loctite this guy. That shouldn't be coming loose, but I have a feeling that's what causes this to break. Well, it's good that it's working. Me back to here. Let's check out them Gila monsters. I don't know why the power's not higher, man. When the guy bites you, I don't know if people ever die, but man, that sucker can bite.
Tankier lizard builds, and possesses one of the highest damage outputs in the game for its size. It owes this high damage not to its actual power stat, but to its venomous bite, a rare ability among lizards. This makes them extremely dangerous in close combat, but its monster is one of the tankier lizard builds. And last in C tier we have the Gila monster. The Gila monster is one of the tankier lizard builds, and possesses one of the highest damage outputs in the game for its size. It owes this high damage not to its actual power stat, but to its venomous bite, a rare ability among lizards. This makes them extremely dangerous in close combat, and combined with their excellent defensive stats and digging ability, this allows them to easily vanquish all of the players in any nest it discovers. The Gila monster is extremely slow moving though, which can cause issues if it's ever forced to flee, or if it needs to chase down a target. The lack of a long whip-like tail also means its defensive combat options aren't near as diverse as other larger lizards. Still, with one of the most devastating bites in the game, it's certainly no low tier. In B tier, we've got the tried and true iguana, arguably the best representative of the lizard build as a whole, as it has essentially all the main weaknesses and strengths of its class. I have an entire video on the iguana, so go check that out if you want an in-depth review, but in short, the iguana sports mid-range stats across the board, and is the first lizard on the tier list to make use of its tail for something other than a sacrificial scapegoat. The iguana's tail whip attack allows it to control a solid defensive zone around itself in all directions, enabling it to defend itself from group attacks. Tail whip's damage is on the low side though, so a persistent attacker could potentially just eat the damage in order to break through and land its own attacks. The iguana also has access to the autotomy ability, but this is especially costly in the iguana's case, as it'd also be giving up its best combat move in the process. Overall, a solid mid-tier with lots of potential, especially in the marine servers. The chameleon build sports several of the most unique abilities in the game. So most lizards, especially the insectivorous ones, have a pretty simple game plan for taking down enemies. Chase them down and grab them. This strategy has a lot of limitations though. First of all, it means you've got pretty much no options to attack a player who is too large to grab. It also forces you to optimize heavily towards mobility, forcing you to neglect other potential strategies in order to have a chance at catching up to your target. The chameleon subverts this limitation by speccing into one of the strangest abilities in the game, a tether tongue attack.
If you've never got to see a true chameleon in your life, they are absolutely some of the most amazing lizards. They have so many insane adaptations, you know, their behavior, their color change, their tongue, prehensile tail, their mittens, they're like opposable thumb type things. Millions are just absolutely awesome. A lot of them have live birth, live young.
This essentially functions as a ranged grab, and is extremely effective at scoring the chameleon kills. This also allows the chameleon the freedom to prioritize other stats over mobility, and in the chameleon's case, they're clearly optimized for stealth, as evidenced by their other special ability, color change. Now, while chameleons can change color in order to buff their camouflage, most use it for communication and intimidation, shifting to brighter colors to display dominance. While they don't have the same cling pattern,
I'm gonna test the tweeter again before I zip this up. Let's get down to the breadsticks. I know the drill and I've got the facts. So everybody needs to relax. Everybody needs to relax. Hope is true, 'cause I depend on you. Let's get down to the breadsticks. I know the drill and I've got the facts. So everybody needs to relax. Everybody needs to relax. Hope is true, 'cause I depend on you. Let's get down to the breadsticks. I know the drill and I've got the facts. So everybody needs to relax.
pads that geckos and anoles do. Their prehensile tail gives them extra security to ensure that they don't get easily ripped out of trees, and allows them to attack from riskier positions. With all this said though, they still struggle when caught out in the open because of their low mobility. And they also share the same offensive weakness of not being able to take down players that they can't gulp down in a single bite.
Can you let me that paragraph?
The TierZoo is a lizard build that has long been overlooked, but has recently become a serious contender on the tier list. Its recent invasion into the North American server has destabilized the local meta, and when you look at their stats, it's easy to see why. TierZoos are similar in both strategy and stats to the iguana, but slightly slower and more defense-oriented. Their thicker hide and stockier build allows them to shake off attacks that would send other characters reeling. They've also got a higher intelligence stat than most lizards, which, in addition to making them surprisingly decent support builds, also makes them great at outsmarting builds like alligators in order to attack their nests. TierZoos are also omnivores, meaning they aren't forced to participate in PvP in order to level up. They did spec into the autonomy ability though, which I unfortunately think keeps them out of top tier. Before I reveal the top tier lizards, I just want to say real quick, if you've made it this far and are enjoying the video, it would sure make my day if you subscribed. Thanks. So without a shadow of a doubt, the best lizard build is the monitor lizard. They have everything. They've got the best stats, a combination of great mobility, power, size, and intelligence. Similar to the iguana, monitor lizards have an extremely powerful tail whip, capable of deterring even top-tier predators. Monitor lizards also have a venomous bite, which again is a rarity in the lizard
really
faction. While not the speediest lizards outright, they do have great versatility in their movement, being able to swim efficiently as well as climb most surfaces. Though not to the same degree as the marine iguana or the gecko respectively. Their high intelligence enables them to consistently figure out ways to successfully raid the spawn points of other players, and their high defense makes it so they can be rather difficult to stop once they've committed to an attack. This faction also contains the most powerful lizard in the game, a lizard that reaches near dinosaur power levels.
If you make a mistake,
Komodo dragons are extremely powerful. They have a venomous bite that, while not as powerful as cobra venom, is still powerful enough to seriously weaken even the tankiest builds. But even without that, they'd be an absolute powerhouse. Their tail swipes, claw slashes, and thrashing bites can easily shred through the HP of their targets. Their only real weakness is their speed, which, while solid, isn't broken by any means. Still, with their incredible sense of smell, a player can never really truly escape a Komodo that's hunting them. The distance that you need to flee in order to make the Komodo unable to track you down would require you to leave the island server entirely. Last but certainly not least, Komodos, as well as the entire monitor lizard player base, understand that their tails are an invaluable weapon that shouldn't be sacrificed in order to escape a battle. So there you have it, the lizard tier list. Hopefully now you've got a good understanding of the lizard's strategies and matchups. Admittedly, there were a few things I had to cut from the script of this video to avoid demonetization or age restriction. If you want to see the director's cut of this episode, you can check it out on Nebula, a streaming service made by and for creators. I do this with all of my new videos, uploading ad-free and uncensored versions of my videos there, as well as a few entirely exclusive videos. In addition, you can check out my appearance on the Nebula exclusive podcast Genesis if you're interested in hearing my character's backstory. Nebula has partnered with Curiosity in dinosaur powerhouses.
I loved my snakes. Here in Hawaii, we got really poisonous sea snakes and little itty bitty Portuguese blind snakes. That's it. People worry snakes would hurt the local ecosystem, but the ecosystem's gone. We got like no native birds left really, and they allow cats in, so not really buying that argument. You know anything about the destructive power of cats, it's just it's not even close. So let's see some. Oh, there's a friend I haven't talked to in a while. Let's see some snakes. I just gotta check something. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Ooh. Man, I hate when I mess up like this.
Snakes are one of the most feared classes in the game, with a number of powerful builds and a vast array of uniquely lethal abilities. However, some of these strategies have clearly been more successful than others. So in this video, which was sponsored by TierZoo, we'll be going over the snake tier list to see which builds rank highest. But before we get into looking at specific snake builds, let's do an overview of the basic attributes and special abilities the snake faction has access to, as well as a quick rundown of the history of the snake faction. So, snakes are one of the newer factions in the game, joining the game's roster during the latter part of the Mesozoic expansion. They began as a niche offshoot of the lizard faction that was specifically adapted to burrowing gameplay. And in order to best min-max for the most efficient burrowing, this player base eventually opted to completely drop the legs attribute. This ended up being a far more successful gambit than anyone could have anticipated, as it not only granted these lizards better burrowing ability, but also opened up a bunch of other strategies to them. While the snake build first hit the scene during a metagame dominated by dinosaurs, they didn't become a huge threat in the meta until after the main dinosaur powerhouses were banned in the KT balance patch. During this chaotic post-banwave meta, snake players...
That's why they call like the extinctions, balance patches, right? Very, very, very video gamey. I'm missing some of these. Oh yeah, there's one. Okay.
Experimented with some crazy builds, including the giant Titanoboa build. But while Titanoboa's giant size granted it short-term success, I think the strategies that the snake player base went on to specialize in are even more effective. Fast forward to today's meta, and snakes are one of the most successful predator factions in the game, owing this success to a handful of powerful, unique abilities. The most obvious of these is slithering, the snake's unique mobility option that it gained in exchange for losing its legs. At first glance, this might seem extremely limiting, as snakes cannot jump and move more slowly than they would if they could run. And while those are significant limitations, the ability to slither does open up a lot of other options to snake mains. Rather than jumping over barriers, snakes can oftentimes find a way to slither through them. This gives snakes access to a lot of areas of the map that are normally much more difficult to access, and means things like dens, nests, and other player-constructed bases are often less effective at keeping snake players out, which makes them one of the best classes at spawn killing. Slithering also allows a comparatively large build to remain very close to the ground and benefit from the stealth bonus of even the shortest grass and foliage. Despite not having claws, snakes make for highly effective climbers, making it very difficult to ever truly get out of reach of a snake. Still, as a rushdown option, slithering tends to be too slow to reliably catch up to other players. So while snakes may not have the ability to chase you down, they've spec'd their movement kit to ensure that...
Now there are very, very, very fast snakes. I think the Mamba and the Lancer, Bushmaster, those kind of snakes, in areas like these really thick jungles and stuff where you barely can move at all, these guys can cook. I think it's something like 10 miles an hour, maybe more. I mean, way faster than you're getting through any jungle. So there's chances where they can chase you down.
That nowhere is ever truly safe from them, and if you let your guard down, they'll be poised to capitalize on that. A snake's basic strike is a little on the weak side for such a dangerous predator. Their bites can't deal that much damage on their own and are easily blocked by armor. It's for this reason that snakes tend to spec into various venom effects to infuse their bites with. Snake venom can have a variety of status effects, which we'll get into more as we progress through the tier list, but in general, venom greatly increases the damage potential a snake can deal with its bite. Without this, many snakes would have no means of defense and would be completely helpless when caught out in the open. Instead, snakes are one of the most feared classes in the game. But which snakes should be feared the most? For that, let's get into the tier list. So, the lower tiers on this list contain members of the snake faction known as colubrids. This is the largest group of snakes and contains almost every snake build in the game, except for the ones you're actually afraid of. Starting at the very bottom of this group, we have the garter snake, one of the weakest snake builds in the game. Data miners are actually unsure whether or not this build is venomous, but if it is, it's some of the weakest venom in the game. And with no other offensive abilities, the garter snake essentially only has favorable matchups against things far smaller than it, like frogs and mice. Because they're so vulnerable, garter snake players love to attack aquatic targets like tadpoles and small fish. But they have no actual abilities that synergize with this playstyle, nor is it a particularly good swimmer, and therefore takes on considerable risk when they venture into the water. Garter snakes are also caught in an endless loop of wasting a ton of evolution points, evolving extreme toxin resistance to the poison of a specific newt build. This isn't very efficient, but I guess the garter snake needs to preserve its few favorable matchups. Next in F tier we have the racer snake. This is a snake build that put an above average number of evolution points into mobility, making it one of the fastest snake builds in the game.
Now when they say racer, I wonder if they're talking about another colobrid, the coach whip, the something near the gopher snake. Gopher snakes are constrictors though. Coach whips, which they call red racers. I think there's another name for coach whips, but they are snakes that they got no venom, but people who free handle rattlesnakes are afraid of them. They're just the meanest, angriest, blunt force trauma snakes you can think of for something so small. I mean, they get about 6 or 7 feet.
It's not really saying a lot given that snakes tend to have pretty poor movement speed, but credit where credit is due, this does give them a much better chance of dashing into cover when under attack. Unfortunately, as with a lot of mobility-centric builds, this alone isn't enough to make them competitively viable.
Yeah, defensively, when the snake disappears, like, they go fast. If there's any kind of cover around, it's amazing how fast they can move away. So maybe offensively they won't chase you down. I don't know about that, but defensively they can get away very, very quickly. Very frustrating for a young herpetologist, let me tell you.
In fact, even with their above average slithering speed, they're usually still too slow to chase down many of their preferred attack targets. They're also worse climbers than most snakes, making them one of the few snakes that can be countered by simply climbing out of reach. In almost all cases, a snake's worst matchup is against birds, and unfortunately for the racer snake, speed usually isn't much use against a surprise aerial attack. Their lack of practical applications for their signature abilities plants them firmly in F tier for me. Next on the tier list we have the vine snake. Now, there are many highly effective arboreal snake builds, and all things considered, the vine snake isn't terrible. It's got great stealth and is an excellent climber.
And they're poisonous.
But I mean, just look at this thing. With the lowest HP and defensive stats of any snake, this build folds to absolutely any attack. Vine snakes entrust their survival to their above average stealth stat, but if that fails and the vine snake is discovered, they resort to intimidation. Their intimidation tactic consists of sticking out their brightly colored tongue as a warning. Much like with the blue-tongued skink, I don't consider this to be a particularly effective defensive display, especially when this warning is backed by some of the weakest venom in the snake faction. Definitely not F tier due to its decent camouflage, but with nothing else going for it, it's stuck in D tier. Next in D tier we have the tiger keelback. This snake build breaks the mold when it comes to toxic strategies in snakes, as rather than dumping all of its evolution points into venom, the keelback also allocates some of its resources into becoming poisonous, meaning that they can inflict the toxic status effect both when dealing damage and when taking damage. This extra defensive ability definitely raises the keelback's ranking compared to most colobrid snakes. However, overall it's still not that great. Both their venom and their poison aren't all that potent, and it's possible that going all in on one of these strategies might have been the better play in the long run. Still, the keelback strategy does mitigate one of the colobrid faction's main weaknesses though, which is that they have a hard time using their venom defensively. Many colobrids, including the vine snake and keelback, are venomous. This is useful because, I mean, how else would a snake barely thicker than a piece of spaghetti deal any damage, right? The problem is, colobrids lack the efficient venom delivery abilities found in the more dangerous snake builds. Their fangs are located at the back of their mouths, and these fangs don't actually inject venom. The venom is just kind of part of their saliva, so to deal any damage with it, they need to really chew on their target for a good chunk of time. As you might expect, This makes individual strikes from most venomous colubrids quite harmless, as they don't contain much venom per hit, and they also can't really use their fangs unless they get a really solid bite in. So the keelback's poison does sort of cover for this weakness, which is great, and for that it gets to the top of D tier. However, a defensive poison is by no means the only way to mitigate the drawbacks of having rear fangs, as we'll see as we move out of the low tier and into mid tier. At the bottom of C tier we have the Boomslang, the most venomous snake build from the Colubrid faction. This snake kinda just does everything the vine snake does, but better. It's an excellent climber and has great camouflage, but also packs a devastating bite with extremely overpowered venom for its tier in terms of potency. And while it does have rear fangs, they're significantly larger than most colubrids. But its best adaptation is that the Boomslang can open its mouth far wider than most snakes, allowing it to deliver a venom-infused bite in spite of the unfavorable location of its fangs. This allows the Boomslang to go toe-to-toe with high-tier builds like the Chameleon, as well as let it use its potent venom as a defensive threat rather than solely just a hunting tool. Now obviously this is still far from ideal. Its venom is quite slow acting, making it not that useful when under attack. In my opinion, the Boomslang is the perfect example of a snake that really just needs 1 or 2 more buffs to be a high tier build, but in its current state it just doesn't quite get there. At the top of C tier we have our last member of the Colubrid faction, the King Snake. The King Snake is a large snake build with no venom-based abilities. Instead, this is the first Constrictor build on our list. Constriction is...
If you don't mind feeding animals to a snake, which is, you may mind very much. King snakes are such amazing pet snakes. They're super friendly, super tame. Lots of them have really cool colors. Love king snakes. Alright, I'm gonna test this one more time. Are newer or older than the black ones? A lot lighter. Let's get down to the breadsticks. I know the drill and I've got the facts. So everybody needs to relax. Everybody needs to relax. Hope it's true, 'cause I depend on you. Go back.
The type of grappling attack that, when properly executed, results in a guaranteed KO, even on extremely large targets. Its main drawback is that this attack strategy is highly vulnerable to disruption. A Constrictor player has to be able to...
This is why they call them king snakes. Look, the king snake's going up. This is a California king. It's going up to eat a rattlesnake. Looks like a speckled rattlesnake.
Survive all counterattacks from its target while attempting to restrain it. So with that said, you'd think it'd be very difficult to use this technique against a venomous snake, right? Snakes are so flexible that it's very difficult to grapple them without giving them an easy opportunity to bite back. That's where the King Snake's second ability, Venom Resistance, comes in. The ability to ignore all damage from a snake's venom makes the King Snake's matchup against other snakes horribly one-sided. Just for good measure, King Snakes have high enough accuracy on their attacks that they tend to go for the head, which negates a snake's counterattack potential even further. This is about where the King Snake's supremacy ends though, as the rest of its matchups are pretty standard for a snake, and with no venom of its own, it doesn't pose much of a threat to players it can't reliably immobilize in its coils. Luckily, there's a pretty simple change a Constrictor build can make in order to increase the effectiveness of its constriction: size. Boas and pythons are the poster children for this type of strategy, being the only snake builds that can be properly classified as tanks. While technically these are two different factions, they are functionally extremely similar and both contain specific examples of highly effective tanky snakes. Although boas and pythons have no venom, their large teeth and incredibly high physical stats make them more than a match for just about any player that challenges them directly. With their thick scales and huge size, it's very difficult to defeat one of these in a 1v1 quickly. Their ability to tank a lot of hits during a fight means that even extremely powerful builds like the Tiger are in for quite an uphill battle if they choose to stand and fight. Well-statted builds with high defense and DPS, like the Crocodilian factions, are easily overcome with brute strength once a boa or python uses their piercing fangs and powerful coils to trap them in an infinite grab combo. Drawbacks to the constriction strategy are vulnerability to third-party attacks and the immense cost of failed kills.
Yoink.
While many constrictors have the size required to challenge other large builds, going after too powerful a target can expend a disproportionate amount of HP compared to other snakes. As large builds are often more conspicuous, the most successful constrictor players will make good use of the camouflage ability. Out of the boa faction, the most powerful build is without a doubt the Anaconda. These are among the heaviest of any snake and by far the tankiest, with an HP stat that renders most physical attacks almost negligible. While Anacondas are significantly less viable on land due to their greatly reduced speed on terrestrial maps, their mobility, stealth, and camouflage bonuses in the aquatic meta make them nearly unbeatable in that biome. Anacondas are capable of serious speed when their buoyancy abilities can counteract the limitations of their enormous size, making nearly any unsuspecting player who enters the water an easy target. Their eyes and noses are oriented towards the top of their faces, allowing them to expend minimal energy while camouflaged in aquatic vegetation, waiting for the perfect opportunity to carry out an ambush attack. Despite their formidable base stats and proficiency in highly specialized forms of gameplay, the fact that Anacondas are only truly viable in aquatic environments limits their utility and places them squarely in B tier. The most competitive build in the Python faction is the Burmese Python. While many snake builds are competitively viable only on certain maps that suit their specialized abilities, Burmese Pythons fit into more of a jack-of-all-trades playstyle and have sufficient mobility in aquatic, terrestrial, and arboreal biomes, in spite of their large size. Burmese Pythons are therefore excellent generalist builds, and as seen with many other generalists, they have been causing serious disruption in servers that they weren't meant to be spawning in. Burmese Pythons have totally destabilized the meta of the Florida Everglades, due mostly to the Python's extremely one-sided matchup against non-social mammal builds, and a lack of the type of builds that normally keep the Python player base in check. Now, thankfully, the current top tier of the Everglades is quite capable of defeating or repelling a Python in single combat, but because the alligator's dominance is restricted to the aquatic zones, Pythons essentially have complete control of the arboreal zone, which has led to a drastic reduction in players running mammal builds like the rabbit, raccoon, fox, and bobcat. While Burmese Pythons come in at the top of B tier due to their versatility, their low speed stat and lack of venom makes higher tier snakes much more viable choices for most gameplay styles. While some snake builds in lower tiers can use the venom skill, placement in A tier or higher rides almost exclusively on choosing to dump a majority of evolution points into maximizing venom efficiency and delivery methods. Members of the Viper class dominate the A tier. Among the most feared builds in the game, Vipers have a variety of special offensive and sensory skills that help compensate for their generally low defense stats. Their long, hollow fangs are placed at the front of their mouths and can pierce most armor to deliver lethal doses of venom. But one drawback to the flesh-destroying hemotoxins used by most builds in this group is that they can take a while to immobilize players. Most Viper builds also spec into the infrared heat sensing ability, making them extremely powerful nocturnal ambush attackers and compensating for their lack of speed. Some members of the Viper faction tack on tail adaptations too, for access to the intimidation and luring abilities, but these perks are minor compared to their raw offensive potential. Coming in at the bottom of A tier are Gaboon Vipers, combining the highest defense stat of any venomous build with near unbeatable stealth and an incredibly high strike speed. Despite their bulky appearance, Gaboon Vipers are almost invisible to spot during gameplay, and are notorious for destroying unsuspecting players due to the sheer volume of venom delivered during an attack, despite their relatively underpowered toxicity compared to other Vipers. With the longest fangs of any Viper, they can deal significant physical piercing damage in addition to any toxic effects caused by the venom. They conserve energy by remaining motionless when not in combat, and are rather difficult to provoke into unnecessary confrontation. While Gaboon Vipers are an excellent choice for ambush-based play in jungle maps, their lack of versatility and low aggression means they can be easily outmaneuvered by other builds. Cottonmouths rank slightly higher in A tier due to their rare ability to use the skill set of the Viper class effectively in the aquatic realm. As the only Viper build in the game with aquatic adaptations, their potent venom and fishhook-shaped fangs make them incredibly effective at farming out fish and frog players for easy XP. This build specs into the Caudal luring ability at lower levels, allowing them to quickly become competitive, and shed this ability at higher levels in favor of better camouflage. Cottonmouths are also relatively tanky and escape many combat situations by using intimidation tactics. Their dominance in aquatic maps makes them able to occasionally overcome more competitive generalist builds, but this is limited by biome and therefore not useful during the majority of gameplay. Rounding out A tier is the Rattlesnake. Best suited for desert and forest biomes, these snakes combine a variety of overpowered special abilities with well-allocated base stats. Rattlesnakes are highly capable builds for ambush-based stealth play due to their ability to create thermal maps of other players in low-visibility situations, which makes them one of the most effective counters for mammal players with the night vision ability. Instead of risking health by grappling with other players, rattlesnakes deliver a lethal amount of venom in one quick strike, and then use their prey tracking ability to find them after they've succumbed to toxic status effects. One major advantage for rattlesnake players is the highly effective rattle intimidation technique, which allows them to scare off more powerful challengers without wasting venom or risking serious damage. While rattlesnakes sit at the top of A tier due to their relatively well-rounded stats among members of the Viper class, all Viper builds are still classified as glass cannons and tend to lose out against opponents with quicker acting venom, superior speed, or high enough HP to tank their attacks. Snake builds placing in S tier overcome the weaknesses of other venom users by maxing out mobility stats and employing a variety of highly effective venom delivery techniques. The most competitively viable snakes spec into heavily neurotoxic venom, granting them the ability to inflict toxic damage and status effects far more quickly than lower tier venom users. While these buffs come at the cost of base defense, S tier
squirrels are in an evolutionary arms race with lots of venomous snakes, and it's pretty incredible. Usually we talk about evolution over, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. In our lifetime, the Mojave rattlesnake has gotten significantly more dangerous to us. Not because it meant to be dangerous to us, but significantly more dangerous to us humans because of their arms race with the squirrel. Pretty incredible. They don't just have the hemotoxic venom that most rattlesnakes have. They have neurotoxic venom as well.
Snakes are only really weak to the rare few players with venom resistance or effective bite evasion skills.
That's a mongoose right there, right?
Coming up first in S tier is the Cobra build. With impressive base speed, these snakes can actively chase down other players rather than having to solely rely on an ambush strategy. Variants of the Cobra build can spec into moderate aquatic and climbing proficiency, allowing for particularly well-rounded gameplay. Their fast-acting venom is mostly neurotoxic, but can have mixed toxic effects that melt through flesh and maximize the amount of pain inflicted. Even elephant players, the tankiest terrestrial build in the entire game, can be taken down by the ridiculous amount of sheer toxic damage inflicted by a well-placed bite. While all Cobra builds have forward-placed fangs to maximize venom delivery, Spitting Cobra players can use the only ranged attack in the entire snake class by spraying venom up to 2 meters through holes at the front of their fangs. This move has high accuracy and can permanently blind other players when used effectively. Cobra builds advertise their power by using a unique hood modification, intimidating the vast majority.
There's a lot of snakes that aren't poisonous in any way, shape, or form that use hoods. The hognose snake is notorious. Like this snake, it'll put on the craziest, scariest display, and it'll make a hood like a cobra, sort of. And it'll act like the toughest thing you've ever seen and try to intimidate you. And if that doesn't work, they act like they're dead and they like barf and they flip over. They flip over on their backs and then, so they're playing dead. But if you flip them over, they flip themselves back over again. It's pretty crazy.
Majority of players away from trying to challenge them in the first place. With enough offensive capabilities to take on an entire team of attackers at once, it's no question that Cobras are one of the most competitively viable builds in the Snake faction. Next in S tier are Sea Snakes. With full aquatic adaptations and special underwater sensory skills, these builds can access hard-to-reach areas to demolish even the most competitive fish players. Their fangs are relatively small compared to the closely related Cobra builds, but this works in conjunction with a special attack style. Their venom is some of the deadliest.
Yeah, in the ocean, you gotta kill so fast, or else, that fish is just gonna swim away. You're never even gonna find it after you bite it. So that bite's gotta be pretty lethal
In the game, but causes almost no pain, meaning that other players may not even know they've been hit before fatal toxic damage sets in. While they are effective at using trickster tactics to take down enemies independently, Sea Snake players can also hunt in teams to capitalize on their own offensive potential and compensate for their low individual HP. This build does have a bit of a high skill floor though, and inexperienced players may struggle at playing around the Sea Snake's defensive weaknesses. The Sea Snake build has a unique playstyle that can be hard to master, but with the ability to 1v1 eels and win, this build sits at the top for those who enjoy a challenge.
Alright, here we go. So this guy can cook on land. Like, you're not outrunning this thing, I don't think. And it's not black. They call them black mambas because the inside of their mouth has this crazy black color.
The final build on this tier list is the Black Mamba. With incredibly overpowered base stats for their class, including ridiculous damage and speed, the Black Mamba is by far the most competitive snake, both in terrestrial and arboreal combat situations. Their speed isn't just with respect to movement. The lethal venom of the Black Mamba takes effect extremely quickly, and can decimate enemies of any size due to the high dose delivered in each bite. Black Mamba venom imposes a variety of neurological status effects, including respiratory failure and vision loss, making them one of the most feared opponents in direct combat. Mamba builds have an extremely aggressive and fast-paced playstyle that leaves little room for counterplay, especially considering that their HP and defense stats are among the highest of any Venom users due to their large size. While they don't have any unique moves to speak of, Black Mambas dominate by using strategies common among Snake players, and do so to an exceptionally effective degree. Topping the charts with the highest DPS potential of any Snake, and respectable defensive skills to boot, the Black Mamba is the undisputed ruler of Snake builds. Snakes are by no means meta-defining, but it's still worth knowing how they stack up against each other and what their main strengths and weaknesses are. There's a lot more to snakes than just their general combat abilities though. How do snakes deal with cold damage? How can snakes climb trees so easily without claws or cling pads? If you're really interested in knowing all the ins and outs of the snake build, I highly recommend checking out this video's sponsor, CuriosityStream.
Alright, so let's see what we can do to figure out why this Legato wireless thing is craptastic. So what's happening to me is it's dropping out at relatively, we got pretty good line of sight, and it's just dropping out everywhere. So other than that, it's really awesome. So I don't know if there's a way to change channels or if there's something you can do. So let's see if we can find Legato. Yeah, let's look at Amazon for this. Let's see if anybody else says the same thing. 90 feet, I'm just not seeing that. And it is 2.4G instead of 5G. The Legato guitar wirelesses were great. They just like all these other one of these type of wirelesses that they don't really have a powered, they're just battery powered for the transmitter and the receiver. Like the X Vive and some of those other styles. They can't handle the volume of high output pickups, including active pickups. And you watch all these review channels on YouTube that talk about them like they're the greatest things that ever made, and they never mention that, which kind of makes me very upset. Let's see. So we get a difference. So I paid like 60 whatever for this, and it works, but not really. Okay, here's another one, but that's 2.4G. So the X5 is also 2.4G. There's a new one from, I don't know, is it for More or Mellow or one of those guys that is actually 5G. Let's see what these reviews. Not bad for the price. I mean, sounds fine for me. See if anybody sees why it's dropping out. Doesn't have a way to change the band if there's interference. Okay. Oh yeah, the X5 one is mono too. That's kind of crazy. Okay, so we're worried about latency. Let's see, no noise. Yeah. Yeah, 2.4G, which is already crowded. Only one channel. I could not determine what channel is on. No ability to change channel. Yeah, 15 feet. That's about what I'm seeing too. No, it sounds good to me. It's the yeah. See, it's just the dropouts. I don't even want to take this with me. Almost, it's kind of useless. I'll put it back in my bag, but I kind of yeah. I think I might have blown money on this for no reason. Again, like I wasted so much money over the pandemic. It's not even funny. Sad. Let's see if there is some kind of 5G. 5G in-ear wireless. How about that? Yeah, Nuix. Or Nux, Nuix, whatever. So this one, I don't know if I want to take a chance. $200. $200. I like how this goes. It has like a little clippy thing. Let's see if they actually show it. Not really.
This little unit solves a really nice common problem. When I'm practicing using the MG400, for example, the headphone cable always gets in the way. I have to tuck it behind the guitar or put the headphones on the wrong way round to have the cable on the right. And connect it to anything with a headphone. Use your headphones wirelessly and connect it to anything with a headphone out. And you can of course use it as in-ear monitors on stage, whichever you prefer. Now you get two units in this padded charging case, and the case itself connects to a USB charger to charge both units at the same time. Really handy. And then connect your headphones to the receiver and the transmitter to your preferred device. Could be a modeler, could be an amp, anything with a headphone out. So you could in effect go totally wireless when using a wireless system such as the Nuix B2 Plus. So I've got three pairs of headphones. I've got the Audio-Technica AT-HM50s, and on the end of that we've got a 3.5mm jack, which obviously just goes straight into the unit. The other set of headphones I've got are just an Amazon $50 set of headphones, and these are quite clever actually because it comes with one cable with a 3.5mm jack and a 5.25" jack, and on the end of the headphones you've got the option to put whichever jack in you want, leaving the other end free. So I just use the 5.25" jack in there, which leaves me the 3mm jack end. The other set of headphones I've got are just a basic pair of Apple. They've got the three backverts. The volume is good too. There's also a volume control on the receiver, and the transmitter comes with a 5.25" adapter, so you can connect it to any headphone out source. Now the spec on the wireless in-ear monitors is a 4-hour battery life, 24-bit quality audio and a 30-meter range. and it's compatible with all headphones that use a 3mm jack, or your headphones may have a 3mm adapter. So all in all, a really good little unit, a really good little system, meaning that you can connect any set of headphones that you've got wirelessly to the output source, or as I said, use them as in-ear monitors.
Was there a picture of the actual way it stays on? Okay, important notice. It's designed for band rehearsals and live performances, prioritizing the best possible stereo experience. You'll enjoy the product and the experience it provides, while it may not be suitable for personal silent practice. Why not? What does that even mean? So this has like an auto channel switch. I wonder if that's actually true. Now see, it shows like it has a clip. Yeah, RX clip can fit on your shirt, belt, or guitar strap. That's handy. Yeah, I'd like to try one of these, but I really don't want to get burned again. It's kind of the one I got was a waste, I think. I like this one. It's so beefy, but it's just mono, and that's fine for the most part, but I wonder who's actually tried this thing. Let's see where these 1-star ones failed after a few months. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Static clipping noise. Great idea, but total fail. Well, looks like X5 one. I don't know. It's a bummer that that's mono, though. That's kind of silly.
This company just came along and gave us exactly what we...
Oh, well. All right, I have got stuff to do. So I'll see